right up to the departure of the last tenant in 1952. The community in Golden Lane was very colourful. At first, it included various employees of the castle, such as the gatekeepers, guards, bell ringers, and later people did not live in Golden Lane themselves, but let the little houses out. The conditions for basic hygiene were, put it bluntly, very backwards. In the 17th century, there was only one privy for the houses, and only in the 18th century was there a second installed. Water pipes were laid here eventually in 1877, and a house at number 24 Golden Lane had none until 1942. The names in the land records that have been preserved are, for the most part, those of people of whom we know nothing. And yet, some of the houses did in fact have famous owners or tenants over the years. By the beginning of the 20th century, residents of Golden Lane were already well aware that their little houses had a special, unique charm, as admiration by society for monuments and old Prague grew. Golden Lane became famous. To increase the attractiveness of their homes for an ever-growing number of tourists and history lovers, the owners began to spontaneously reconstruct and re-modernise their houses. Cozy rooms began to change into rooms with wooden floors and tiled stoves to appear nobility-like. Furniture in various styles was added, and the windows were dressed with net curtains. The walls were painted bright and colourful. The owners used stencils, hung patriotic colourful prints, family photos, and home embroidery. They began to compete with their neighbours to decorate their rooms. You have to remember, many of the houses were not occupied by the owners themselves. From their more comfortable apartments in Prague, they came daily to the lane, opened the houses up to tourists and visitors who, as with Mrs. Magdalene's house, paid a few coins for the chance to look around and to see what all the fuss is about. The most enterprising owners even rented their houses to artists or writers who were looking for inspiration for their work. House number 6 used to stand near the office of the Lord High Burgrave, and its roof was as high as the pavement in Golden Lane. In the 1960s, it was demolished during the alterations to that part of the castle. Shortly before World War II, it was the home of the poet Yaslav Slyflet, and he wrote many collections of poems and verses, his most famous being 8 Days and Clad in Light. House number 12 was in the late 1930s the temporary home of writer of prose fiction Airy Merinek. In the romantic atmosphere of Elaine and in everyday contact with the past, he found inspiration for his writing, particularly for his historical novels and short stories. Once Airy Merinek moved out, the amateur historian and collector Joseph Kazda moved in the 1950s. Following his lifetime interest in the world of films, produced both at home and abroad, he became one of the great connoisseurs. After the cessation of a film distribution company he founded, Commedia Film, Kazda was forced to rent several discreet, unused warehouses where his material was preserved. One of the discreet places was the house in Golden Lane, where between 1948 and 1952 the art society met around at Kazda's house. Here, every day of the week, Kazda organised a variety of lectures and screenings, while his wife cooked delicious soup for the guests. In the 1960s, Kazda worked for the Identification Commission of the National Film Archive. Due to him, many anonymous characters and situations in many photographs and negatives were given names and explanations, which could only otherwise have been recognized by actual witnesses who had been living at the time. House number 14 still has an old sign of a playing cards, an owl, and, a crystal ball. Which street doesn't have a clairvoyant? Well, for many years, the home was used by renowned clairvoyant and tarot card reader Madame Phoebus. My apologies. Her real name was Matilda Prisonova. House number 22 was a name which most of us will be familiar with. Franz Kafka. in 1916 and in 1977 he occupied this house. He rented it from his sister, far from a bustling centre of Prague. He could work uninterrupted, and he actually wrote his novel The Country Doctor at this location. Number 27 was occupied by the Herbalist. Unfortunately, I'm not sure of the dates of the occupier. The herbalist's help was sought after not only by members of the community of the castle, but often by the nobility. In addition to the rational approach to the treatment, the herbalist used methods of magic and incantation. Also had the skill to use herbs to treat wounds and provide assistance to the suffering. Such folk healers and herbalists often had enough experience to carry a certificate stating that someone was successfully cured by them. The most common method of healing was through the use of herbs and botanical extracts. So as you can see, a very colourful community of people lived in Golden Lane. And when you visit, you will pay a toll to enter, just like they would have done in the past. So if you go, enjoy yourself, and just remember, it can get crowded.